Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast Deep Dive. I'm your host, John Barker.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's dig deeper.
IT SPARC Cast Deep Dive is a venture into topics that we feel are important, with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors.
Oh, good Lord, and we have the scars to prove it. But this topic that we're talking about is remote work, and it's a topic that we very much care about. If you follow our news, you'll find it pops up a lot there. We wanted to dig deeper into this because we're really curious about the motivations and what's going on out there. We're seeing a lot of drives for RTO, or return to office, that are founded on mistaken concepts and metrics. So we're going to explore this in depth, and this episode, we're going to go deeper into a specific thing, which is time.
This is episode 8 of a series on remote work and the RTO debate. If you haven't watched the previous 7 episodes, you can either do that before or after watching this episode. This episode is a bit of a standalone, so it doesn't need much context, so it's not required that you watch the other 7 episodes first. If you find this interesting, definitely go back. If you're on YouTube, there will be a card at the end of this video that will link you to the first video, and you'll be able to go watch the series from there. If you're on the audio podcast, or if you want to look through the show notes, there will be a link to that series in the show notes. In those 7 episodes, we covered why remote work is important, why it fails, and how to succeed. We covered some of the technical topics like cameras, sound, lighting, things like that. We also had a 2-part series on proper management techniques and strategies for managers that manage remote workers, as well as maybe a combination of remote workers and on-site workers. So again, check those out after you finish this episode. But with that, Lou, why don't you go through what you're thinking when it comes to time expectation and time management?
Absolutely. So what I think, we've sort of been talking about the pros and cons of remote work, but I don't think we have really totally addressed what I consider the key tension that is driving this entire phenomena. And the key tension is time. So what I'd like to do is go into the history of how we dealt with this, where we are today, and where I think we're going to go. Now, this is not a new discussion. As we're going to see here, Napoleon Bonaparte was most famously quoted, "You can ask me for anything you like except time." So it's always about time. And so I'm going to take us into the Wayback Time, because right now, when we get in a job, when we are accepted with an employer or an employee, we say we're a manager and we've hired somebody, there's expectations of what you'll be doing with your time and how you will be compensated that drives the tension we're seeing. So it's really, money, time. Money is time when you get down to it. If I have money, I can hire somebody to do something or buy a thing that I don't have time to make. That's really how this works. And so this has been going on for a long time, and I'm going to walk you through this, but I'm going to give this to you right up front. We need to be spending as much time setting expectations about our time and our usable time from both directions. This is really important in IT. And I'll get into this in a second, but it's important everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are in this spectrum. This applies to you. So let's take a look. First of all, let's turn the Wayback Machine all the way back to, okay, we don't have an industry, right? And time used to be defined by, is it light or is it dark? If it's light, I can go out and do work. If it's dark, got to go to bed, do something else, right? And most of human history, that's how we've dealt with things, right? We went and did things. Now, we've heard from various anthropologists and stuff that in much more primitive societies that had lower density, that's the type of primitive, not, philosophically, we don't know that you didn't do as much, right? Earlier humans laid around a lot. They were hunter-gatherers. If they had enough food, they didn't go out and do anything. But as we started to increase our density and production, time became a really critical variable. So what really whacked this in the upside the head was 2 things, right? First of all, the Industrial Revolution came along. What's the big deal there? First of all, you could amplify human time with machines. Wow, okay. The machines were expensive, but if I put some people in them to push them harder, whether it's a weaving machine or a machine that makes gears or whatever, then I could get a lot more out, a lot more productivity. Second thing, artificial lighting, right? Whether you're talking about whale oil or kerosene or acetylene or electric lights that came about sort of at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, suddenly night wasn't night anymore. And that meant you could work longer hours, which is precisely what happened. And that led to the first 8-hour workday, which really came in through, and I did not know this, President Ulysses S. Grant was the first one to do this 8-hour day proclamation declaring that employers cannot reduce wages as a result of the reduction of the workday. This happened in 1869, right? So United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners was one of the drivers behind this. So a lot of the union stuff wrapped into this. At the same time, there was another effort in Europe, I believe it was in Denmark, to decrease, to push towards that 8-hour day. 1916, there was something called the Adamson Act for the 8-hour day for the railroad workers. Now, we're geeks, right? We're in the cutting edge information world. Back then, railroad workers were the geeks. They were the ones who were doing all the, cutting edge switching and stuff like that. Safety was a real concern. Work longer than a certain amount of time, human brain starts to a little iffy on safety. And that's when you have accidents. And when you have accidents around trains, it's pretty nasty. So 1916, we got that. So this was relatively new, but at the same time, right, the ideas of what constituted overtime and stuff like that was starting to come as well. The big mover in private industry for this, believe it or not, along with others, you may already know this, was Henry Ford. Henry Ford believed that if you gave your people enough money and gave them time to use the stuff that you were selling, that you would be more successful. And if all his workers, who were probably his best salesmen, were in the factory, they weren't out driving their cars and showing it off to their friends. That was a smart move, right? But at the same point, we ran around, there was a whole bunch of labor laws. There's a Fair Labor Standard Act came along. And what it did is it sort of codified what was exempt and what was non-exempt. And if you're non-exempt, that means if you work more than 8 hours, they got to pay you overtime. Now, everybody who's watching this podcast, I'll bet you're exempt, right? Why does HR spend so much time looking for college degrees? Because it's really easy to make people with college degrees exempt workers. They're considered professional. Now, some states do better at this than others. It was noted in my research that California was one of the ones that pushed hard that even if you had a degree, that they could make you non-exempt and people would have to pay overtime, depended on the nature of the work. Things are starting to move in that direction more now. So that was then. What's going on now, right? Well, in the present, what happened is a couple of things that really smacked us upside the head. At the turn of this century, something really new happened. First of all, laptops and VPNs came along. Laptops got to be inexpensive, powerful, and very easy to connect, which meant you could expand the office to anywhere. Now, if I'm talking to you and you're in IT, you already know this because they use you anytime to get to this stuff, and you have to support people anywhere they are, right? So this is a brand new thing. It's really tough. Another huge thing was pagers and cell phones being the biggest. I would argue probably the biggest breakthrough in this was the original Nokia cell phone. Maybe the StarTAC, as well. I don't know, John, what do you think in that sector? What would you consider a breakthrough for this?
Well, yeah. So my first phone was the MicroTac, original flip phone,
That's where I
and
was.
then I had several Nokias before I went to smartphones. But I think that just the fact that it was portable. Now, I mean, this MicroTac didn't really fit in your pocket unless you had really big cargo pants, but it was portable. But shortly thereafter, that thing was like, it was always with you, and they got really small. They got really small. Make our current smartphones look like behemoths comparatively, and that was just like, it was easy. I always had it on me. It was like picking up my keys. It was sitting there next to my bed while I was asleep. It was my alarm clock, all of those things, and that caused a level of connectivity that was both a good thing in that I had constant access to the world, but it also meant that the world had constant access to me.
And that is
Now,
exactly where I'm going with this.
I'm a Gen Xer, and I have been recently watching a lot of content and listening to podcasts and such on Gen X culture. And one of the things that keeps coming up is, you know, our phones had coiled cords connected to the wall. And if I left the house, that phone didn't come with me. And my parents had no idea where I was. I was off, supposed to be not coming home until the street lights came on. And I was disconnected. And that was the whole Gen X culture back then. We are so opposite from that. I know I get text messages, I get alerts from apps when my son is late for a class, in between classes, right? That level of connectivity and hyper focus on every little piece of minutia it's a little crazy.
But how does this relate to this discussion? I would argue that when Apple came out with the iPhone, that was a step change. I think it was a big step change, but it wasn't as big a step change as just having a phone, right? Because the problem was, those of us who had phones early, before that we had pagers. We didn't pay for those. The employer paid for those. And because they paid for them, we never had the discussion, a really serious discussion, about when you should bug me and when you shouldn't. Not explicitly. Now, those of us who were in the mix enough kind of realized, okay, yeah, we're gonna, if I'm getting harassed or whatever, but it was never formalized. When I used to carry, first time I carried a pager was in the Air Force, my first duty station. If you were on standby, which meant for that week, anytime that you had the pager and anytime that pager went off, you had to get up or stop what you were doing, head out and fix that problem after hours, right? And there were a lot of times when I was up at 2:00 in the morning.
Well, that brings up an interesting point. In who is paying for your cell phone bill? So the last company that I joined, this was 2012 when I first started working there, their policy was that they paid for at least a certain percentage of my cell phone bill. Because I was in sales and I was expected to always have my phone and be able to reach out to customers and to use that phone. And if I was on the road, then that was a tool. But most people in the company had some sort of cell phone reimbursement. That's largely gone away, right? So, but I think that the reason that started was then the company could justify reaching out to you on a Saturday and saying, hey, can you go take a look at this? Or can you get, whatever it is, can you go do this? And then because, well, really, as the company, that's my cell phone that I've given you and I'm letting you use it. So because you can
Exactly.
use it. And then that trend has kind of gone away. There's some companies that still do that, but some don't. But it's interesting. What we're talking about here when it comes to time is oversteps that start to happen, and then the benefit of those oversteps in some cases pulled back. And that's what the return to office mandates are all about, is they want your time back for no additional remediation. You're not getting any
100%.
additional pay for the commute time and the other lost time that you're spending. But that company is getting something in value for this, that, or at least they're perceiving they're getting value. and that, in my opinion, they don't have to hire as many competent managers that that can handle remote work in the remote
Absolutely.
workforce.
And there's two more things we have to address in this current thing that I think are very, very important for you to think about. One is the rise of employee stock options. And if you really want to talk about employee stock, whatever remuneration of that type used to be reserved to the C-suite. It was Steve Wozniak at Apple in the early days of Apple who took his block of stock and said, I don't think this is right, distributed it to other founders of the company, people who wouldn't normally got it. Really, the rise of employee equity started there, as far as my research has been able. And I grew up in the Silicon Valley. I don't know, could be hearsay. Throw something at me, I'll answer it or dig it up some more. So that happened. So now you're an owner, right? Of course you want to spend more time. It's going to make your stock go up. Then COVID hit. And what happened when COVID hit? First, they forced you out of the office and said everything's going to be fine, it's all going to work. So now we have a situation where we're reachable at all times. We can do our job from anywhere. We've already been shoved into a corner and proven that a lot of us can do our job. We can work from home. Oh, and now companies are telling us that, don't trust that stuff. Even though everything worked fine when you were away from home, we need you back in the office. So I want you to think about that little statement. Does that make sense to you? Doesn't make sense to me. Well, it's good because I worked for this guy. He didn't do that.
We did an episode, as I said, actually 2 episodes specifically on how to manage remote workers effectively. And there was a lot of great information there. If you are on YouTube, I will put a link right above Lou's head right now, so you can click on that and watch it. If you're on the audio podcast, that link will be in the show notes. It's something worth looking at. We've gotten a lot of feedback, and we'll talk about the feedback at the end of the show that we've gotten on those episodes, but it seems to be resonating. As I post on LinkedIn and on X, these basically what I would refer to for myself as anti-return to work tirades. I'm getting so much traction from people. There are so many people out there that believe that we can succeed with remote work and that return to office is not a requirement for the majority of us. So go check those out. I think that you'll learn a lot. And
It really does.
Hopefully you can help your company. Honestly, it's a win-win. We've said that over and over again. Remote work is a win-win. Saves money for the company, makes them more efficient. You have happier employees that do better work, even if it's on a weird schedule, but they are willing to give more because they're getting more back.
So let me tell you what I think is going to happen in the future. And John, thank you so much. You really set me up for this, right? We're seeing a lot of the return to office stuff now, major pushback. Why is return to office a hot thing now? I believe this is cyclical. We're seeing a downturn in the economy. Nobody wants to be accused of laying anybody off because it hits your reputation. It's going to hit your ability to hire later. Bad news is by pulling something like this, you're already hitting your reputation. People are not going to want to work for you if you're doing this. You're going to have a lot more trouble getting people. And this is going to be incredibly important because the pendulum always swings. At some point, this is going to come back up again. You're going to want to bring people in, and they're going to look at your past policy and go, you're going to do this to me. You're not going to have a good answer, right? But I think hybrid work is going to become the norm. John and I have discussed multiple times with you that there's some jobs you can't do remotely. And we don't say do everything remotely. We are personally big fans pulling in teams every quarter, having team building, sitting down, taking a meal together, brainstorming together. It really builds up bonds that make a much stronger team. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper than putting somebody in a fabric box 24/7. So what's going to happen? This is what I think. This is Lou's future prediction. Hybrid work will be the norm. And this is why. Some jobs requiring full-time presence will have it, but even that is going to start to tail off as we start hitting telerobotics. And that will happen. That is coming. So programming, sales, AI, stuff like that, you can be fully remote. And John and I have worked in sales. I've worked in technical marketing. You could do a lot of stuff remotely. But Several factors are going to drive it. One, cost of employees. If you're talking about the actual cost to get somebody in a high cost area versus an area like John and I, John, you probably live in a higher cost area than mine. Maybe our areas are somewhat.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with my wife earlier today. So I'm in the Boston area, outside the suburbs of Boston, and it's not a cheap area to live. We were thinking about trying to get my father to move closer to us, but the cost of living here is a lot higher than where he lives now. He's on a fixed income, so it may not make sense.
And I live up in the high country of North Carolina. You've heard of us, Western North Carolina, from the damage from the hurricane and all the fighting over the cleanup. I always find there's some really high-end stuff up here. So it's cheaper, but it's also kind of a tourist area. So people really want to live here now. Our costs are going up, but I guarantee you, either one of us is going to be less expensive than somebody in the Silicon Valley. Right?
100%.
And you're going to want to be able to tap that when you start going on. The other thing that's going on here is traffic and congestion, right? So time is the thing. All the cities want you to come in and then they want to stuff you into mass transit. That's not the answer. The answer is to not have a commute or to stagger the commute. Now, some places have tried this, but you can't do this unless you can work remotely. Right? If you're trying to keep your business running. So after this, there's a huge devaluation that is starting to occur and is going to continue to occur on commercial leases because you don't really need that much office space anymore. That's part of what's driving this return to work is angsty CEOs and CFOs that want to waste your time because they don't like looking at empty fabric boxes. That is not a good reason to go and sit in traffic, in my opinion.
So Lou, you kind of started this conversation talking about time and expectations. So why don't we get into that? And how do we set those expectations? Who should be setting expectations? Is it a one-way street? Is it a two-way street? What are your take on this?
It is absolutely a two-way street. And I think that we should be negotiating time like we negotiate our salary. We should come to explicit agreements. And when I say explicit, if you can get it in writing, get it in writing. Legal contracts that are pushing us more towards a work-life balance that's sustainable. Now, I know there's some companies, I've got friends at startups right now. You can work a half day, whichever 12 hours you like. But, and we've all been through that, right? But the potential reward perhaps in your opinion, in this startup, justifies that viewpoint. You can't stay that way forever, right? Amazon's trying to stay that way. Andy Jassy, thank you, I think I got that right. Andy Jassy as much stated it. The answer is it is not sustainable. You're going to burn people out left and right and just be running around cooking people until there's nobody left to hire. You have to figure out a way to make your business sustainable. When you're just starting up, okay.
You know, the thing that occurs to me when we talk about this is that prior to the pandemic, we didn't know any better. I mean, some of us did, but overall, as a world, we didn't realize that so many people could actually work from home and be efficient. But imagine today if somebody said, well, you now can't have a smartphone anymore. How much would that change your life? Right? I mean, that's
a great point.
A smartphone is a huge part of your life, but because we realized what it was giving us, it gives us the total sum of knowledge on the planet in your pocket. Now, go back to, I can actually work from home. I can take a break. The example I like to give is like, at 3:00, I can go pick up my daughter from school and bring her home. And then I can fill in that time later after she goes to bed. I have more flexibility in my schedule. And you know what? Because of that flexibility and getting time back with my daughter or some time with my wife or son, I might take your call on Saturday. It might help you out.
That's why I said, and I will stand on this for all my days, flexible work and remote work are going to become the rule because that's the only way you're going to be able to get those numbers back up again. That means we're going to have to change how we engage in work. But for you right now, Make a contract. Get a contract with your manager. Set expectations. Be upfront about this. We do not talk about this normally. And I think it's really important. Now, good managers do talk about this. And I had this discussion with my people as well. But a lot of folks, good management is not totally ascendant at the moment, giving all the RTO. You need to be very explicit about how much time you're going to work and what's acceptable and what isn't from both ends. What does management expect? What do you expect? Negotiate. It's really the key thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great things that you can do as part of that discussion for yourself, but then also for your team. So for yourself, ask questions about the expectations of the job. Are you being measured on output or time at the keyboard? Right? Those are two very different things. And I can spend a truckload of time at a keyboard and not get much done, or I can be super efficient sometimes and get things, get a lot of output done in a short period of time. What's important to your employer? At the end of the day, they want both. They want you to be efficient for a long period of time, but they gotta, you have to have this conversation. And if they don't have a good answer for you,
right?
They do.
Get more blood.
But if they don't have a good answer for you, that's a red flag, right? And you as a manager need to have a good answer. You need to be setting those expectations. You need to let them know that, yeah, you know what, there is a staff meeting at 10 a.m. every Monday that I need you to be at, right? And if you have people that have a problem with that 10 a.m. slot for whatever reason, maybe you can adjust it, something that works for everybody. But at the end of the day, set those expectations. But no, if you need to take off at 3 o'clock for 20 minutes to go pick your kid up at school and bring them home, okay, I don't have a problem with that.
Why is this even an issue?
Why is it an issue? Like I don't need people on my team to tell me that I'm going to be out of the office for 3 hours on Thursday because I have a doctor's appointment. I don't need to know that. Did you get your stuff done today? Great. We're good. That's all I need to know.
Schedule your meetings around so that time is open. Go do your thing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
But it's hard.
So expectations are critical here. And again, two-way street.
Yes.
As an employee, ask for those expectations, ask what's expected of you. And as a manager, give expectations and then have that conversation both directions, up and down, and make sure that you're sticking to them.
When I used to pull standby, and I was heel and toe in standby for a year, my week of standby off, I got an extra day. In the military, they would give me a 3-day weekend every other week because I would get up at 2 a.m. because a sergeant couldn't tune an HF radio. So there's all sorts of tools you have from both the management side and an individual contributor side to work on this issue, but we're not discussing it other than leaving. People leave the job. Maybe you have a little more leeway than you think you do. And what do you have to lose if you're going to leave anyway? Negotiate. Time matters. We all learned that during COVID. All of us lost people we knew about. And that was another big change as well. Everybody in the world is now paying more attention to personal time.
100%. 100%. So as we get ready to wrap up, I want to just go dig into the mailbag. And we got some good feedback and interaction on X this week based on the last 2 episodes on managing remote workers. And there is a handle on X that is at managing the biz, B-I-Z, and it's about business management techniques. And they have a lot of really great insight. And so they liked our idea of virtual coffee breaks. And what they said was low pressure, inclusive spaces like virtual coffee breaks are an underrated tool for building team connections. It's not about the agenda. It's about showing up and fostering trust. Sometimes it's the unsolicited moments that strengthen team cohesion the most. I couldn't agree more. That is an outstanding statement from this person. I recommend that you follow them on X and try to get some more notes. They also sent another one when we were talking about what happens when people don't show up to meetings. And their response was, optional meetings aren't just about attendance. They're a thermometer for team dynamics. If people aren't showing up, dig deeper. Disengagement might not start with a coffee break, but it can end with resignations. Leaders, the best time to listen is now. And that's very much echoing what we had said about people not showing up and why they're not showing up. And it's a sign of a problem. So I really was very happy to have that level of interaction. That is going to cover this episode. We do want to hear from you. You can reach out to us on X at IT SPARC Cast. You can send us email, feedback at itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com. We really want to know what you feel. Do you feel that that expectations are being properly set on time and the time given to the company and given to the individual? Do you feel that maybe we need to go further in those and actually, as Lou kind of hinted, get that written into a contract? Do you have any other topics you want us to cover, whether it's on the remote work aspect or any other aspects of how IT can help the business run? We definitely want to hear from you, so please send us a note there. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That's really going to help this channel grow. If you're enjoying this content, if you feel that this is valuable, make sure you tell your friends and colleagues about it so that they are getting the same information you are. So with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. We'll see you on Friday. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.